Evening, friends. This is David Warren, and it's time for another chapter of The Unknown Presidents. Today's unknown president will be our 29th president, Warren G. Harding, who served from 1921 to 1923. To tell you the story of Warren G. Harding, I turn the program over to Colonel Kensington.
Thank you, Dave. Well now, Warren G. Harding. Oh, he was quite a rascal, he was, but a lovable rascal. Everybody liked him, and he liked everybody. He was a most agreeable lad, and had many friends growing up. As a young child, young Warren was called Winnie by his family. Here little Winnie is shown with his sisters. Winnie loved animals and always avoided fistfights. Young Warren tried his hand at many occupations as a young man, as a school teacher, a railroad worker, and even an insurance salesman, before he finally bought the Marion Star, a newspaper that was going downhill, which he immediately made successful, and was a great newspaper writer and editor for many years. Well, the young 25-year-old Harding met and fell in love with a widow by the name of Florence de Kling. She was a bit older than him. She was 5 years older, but he did fall in love with her, and the two of them got married in the year 1891. Now, they had no children of their own, but she had a son by her first marriage, and so Harding helped to raise the boy and set him on the proper path. But their marriage was not a happy one. And indeed, Warren Harding often took long stays away from his wife in a Michigan sanitarium. He referred to her as the Duchess because she had such a intimidating and formidable way about her. And indeed, he stumbled from one affair into another. He had an affair with a good friend of his wife's, a young woman named Carrie Phillips. Warren and Carrie Phillips, they carried on for a number of years. And it was only when he was running for president and she threatened to expose him that the Republican committee had to make a deal with her to keep her quiet. But no matter, by then, Warren Harding was having another affair with a young woman named Nan Britton. After he became president, the story goes that she would come to see him in the White House, and they would go into a closet in the Oval Office and have their way with each other. And the story goes that he fathered a young girl by Nan Britton. It was not proven until many years later with DNA that she was indeed the illegitimate daughter of Warren G. Harding. So Harding moved up somewhat in politics, and he was elected to the Senate from Ohio. And then in the election of 1920, the Republicans could not come to a consensus on the two leading candidates. And so in a smoke-filled room, the name of Senator Harding surfaced, and he became the nominee of the Republican Party and chose Calvin Coolidge as his running mate. Senator Harding conducted his campaign exclusively from his front porch at his home in Marion, Ohio. Yes, Harding campaigned on America First and returning to normalcy. And they easily defeated the ticket of James M. Cox and a young Franklin Delano Roosevelt. As president, Warren G. Harding was indeed a lovable man. Everybody liked him.
Here, President Harding is pictured with his dog, Laddie Boy. Laddie Boy always brought him his morning newspaper and retrieved golf balls. Oh, the press loved Laddie Boy, and they even interviewed him once.
But he just had a hard time saying no to people, and he surrounded himself with a lot of very shady characters. He loved to play poker. And quite often he was caught shortchanged as far as cash goes. And so he would use some little pieces of White House china in which to pay his debts to his poker friends. Harding was, once his father said to him, "Warren, it's a good thing you were not born a girl, because you would be pregnant all the time, because you can't say no to anyone." Harding, as I said, he was a loved president, but because he surrounded himself with these shady characters, soon scandals began to surface. And by the third year he was in office, he was just didn't know what to do. He even once said, "I have no business being here in this office." Quite obviously, he says, "I don't know what I'm doing." But it was his friends that caused him problems. One time he said, "You know, my enemies give me no problems, but my friends, my damn friends, they're the ones that keep me walking the floor at night."
Then word came to Harding of a scandal involving his good friend and appointee, Charles Forbes, who was head over the Veterans Bureau. He chastised him privately, but publicly he did not, and he allowed Forbes to resign and flee the country. And then a short time later, another scandal erupted involving Attorney General Harry Daugherty. But the worst scandal involved Secretary of Interior Albert Fall, who was involved in an oil scheme known as the Teapot Dome. President Harding knew of these scandals, but did nothing about it, and indeed this one did not even become public until after Harding's death. Albert Fall became the first cabinet member to ever be convicted in a court of law and sent to prison. President Harding sought the advice of his trusted Commerce Secretary Herbert Hoover and said, "If you knew of a scandal in our administration, would you, for the good of the country and the party, expose it, or would you bury it?" And Herbert Hoover replied, "Publish it."
Once these scandals began to surface, President Harding felt that he needed to make a goodwill tour across America to try to lift everyone's spirits, as it will.
And so, during the summer of 1923, President and Mrs. Harding set off on a railroad trip west, a cross-country tour of the country, which was to be called the Voyage of Understanding, and the trip was to wind up in Alaska. He was the first president to ever visit the territory of Alaska.
Well, upon leaving Alaska, the president, he became more morose. At one point he was on a ship, and the ship ran into some trouble, and he said, "I hope this damn thing sinks." And then he ate what was called some tainted crab, and he developed a bad stomach disorder. And at first that's what they thought it was, simply a stomach disorder. But the president had suffered with high blood pressure all of his life, and he also had an enlarged heart. And so it came to be, as they entered San Francisco in early August of 1923, the president took severely ill and went to bed. He awoke with a strange sinking feeling and told his wife that he had never felt this way before, but began to arouse a bit. And on the day of August 2nd, 1923, his wife was reading to him, and he said, "That's good, read some more," and then died a few short minutes later. And so, as a shock to the nation, this president who was so loved had died in office.
The president's body was brought back to Washington, D.C., where he lay in state in the East Room. At this time, Warren G. Harding was considered one of the most loved presidents in all of history.
His wife, his widow, Mrs. Harding, did not have an autopsy done. And at first there was rumors that perhaps she had had him poisoned, but that was never proven. And just a little over a year later, Mrs. Harding herself died and joined her husband, and they were both buried in Ohio. There goes the very sad story of a man who just perhaps was not up to the job, but he was a lovable man. And it was a rather unfortunate, but still, that's the story of Warren G. Harding.
Very interesting story, Colonel. Thank you very much. Well, there you have it, my friends. The story of our 29th President, Warren G. Harding. A very interesting man. We'll be back later for another unknown president. Until then, this is David Warren. Back to you, Wolf.